Hello, I'm Bernie Hayes. Today's guest is Greg Carr. He's so many things, it's hard to describe. Today on The Bernie Hayes Show. Welcome back. My guest is Greg Carr. And like I said, he's so many things. Right now, he's teaching courses at the Harris-Stowe State University. He's been at SIU. He's just been so many different things and doing so many wonderful excursions. Greg, welcome. So good to see you, man.
Good morning, Bert. Always a pleasure, sir. Always.
You know, you do so many things. It's hard to describe who Greg Carr is. You just finished a play at Harris-Stowe, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, tell us about that. Now, were you in charge of the department?
I am the theater director there.
Yeah.
I've been theater director for about 8 years now. We do a lot of social justice pieces. We've done that since 2018.
Yeah.
We started off in a social justice mode with a play that I wrote called Live from Ferguson, which kind of chronicled the protest that was going on there. So we've had some really great opportunities. So one of my students who kind of caught on to this flame said, Professor Carr, I know this book. It's called Stamped from the Beginning by a gentleman named Ibram X. Kendi. For Black History Month, why don't we do an adaptation and do some sort of reader's theater in which the actors have the books in their hands, but they're acting out of it. And so I read it. I said, this is amazing. I said, but let's make this a collaborative effort. So we did this over our Christmas holiday. We all got on one Google Doc. We all started adding stuff to it. It was a total collaborative effort. And there are 5 people that are chronicled in this book. Cotton Mathers, who's a puritanical minister from the 1600s colonial era.
Sure.
Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd president of the United States. Then we have William Lloyd Garrison, a very fiery abolitionist. The great W.E.B. Du Bois, great philosopher and thinker. And then we end with Angela Davis, the great activist. And so my students and I, we spent a good 2 months learning about these people because many of them didn't even know about these people.
Wow.
And so we had to portray them. And so they did these different scenes and we transitioned from scene to scene. And each time we talked about what the person said. And sometimes, and we divided them into 3 categories as Dr. Kendi does. He said there's segregationists, there are assimilationists, and anti-racists. So Cotton Mather and Thomas Jefferson fall in the segregationist category. William Lloyd Garrison was assimilationist because he wanted everybody just to assimilate and be one. And then you have W.B. Du Bois, Angela Davis, who were anti-racist, said, let's tear down the system of racism and white supremacy so everybody can have an opportunity.
Is that the book you're talking about?
This is the book. Yes, Stamped from the Beginning. This is it. It's great.
Stamped from the Beginning?
That's one.
Tell us about it.
Well, like I said, it's
definitive history of racism.
It really is. It's so well done. Again, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, as I said to you before, he's one of our young Du Boises right now.
Yeah.
You know, and so I wanted to introduce them to a Black intellectual because, as you said before, our young people know a lot about the rappers, they know a lot about the entertainers, but we also have some very excellent young Black intellectuals.
Sure.
And so by them reading this and researching this, they got an opportunity to see that, yes, Black people can think on a high academic level, but also as artists, we can also portray this and put this out there.
Greg, when the students learned about the people that they were portraying, what was their reaction?
Sometimes they were just in shock.
Really?
Especially when we read, because we started off with Cotton Mather. I didn't know much about him except from high school. He was on one of our high school reading English lists.
Yeah.
But once we got into it, Cotton Mather was a master at using religion to tell Black people that they should be happy about their condition.
Yeah.
And he warned them about, you don't want to be free because you couldn't take care of yourselves. It's best that you're slaves. He even says, the Bible even says the Gentiles allowed them to have, he was masterful.
Yeah.
And in the end, which is very powerful, we had all the students because, when you're at church at the end of the service, they do what's called a benediction, the good words. That's what benediction means. But in this last phrase of Cotton Mather, he basically because he's preaching to Black people, to enslaved Black people, he's telling them, if you don't obey your masters, you're going to go to hell, you're going to burn in hell, you're going to freeze in hell, and all these things were going to, it was like he's pronouncing a curse upon them if they didn't obey their earthly masters.
Sure, yeah. Like you mentioned, W.B. Du Bois.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know the rivalry or I don't know how I can describe it, but they had the same relationship. He and Booker T. Washington.
Yes.
As Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
It's some media driven.
Yeah.
Some
sure.
media driven.
Yeah.
Sure.
But there's so much that we don't know about our own people, and this book, I assume, tells quite a bit about it.
It really does. The one thing I love about the book, also, it kind of introduces us to W.B. Du Bois' great work, The Souls of Black Folk.
Yeah.
Many of my students, again, had never heard of the story, never heard of the book, and then we read his opening, Between the World and Me, which is just so poetic and so beautiful. And after we read it, my students literally took a gasp. They said, he is so brilliant.
Yeah.
His words, as I know, his great vocabulary. He's the first Black graduate of Harvard University. And one thing we learned, and I also learned in the process, was when we would watch these like mini documentaries about the people. Maybe they couldn't be more than 5 minutes long. Mm-hmm. W.B. Du Bois went to Fisk University, and then he applied to Harvard. And Harvard said, we don't accept your degree from that colored university. You must come here and start. And Du Bois said, okay.
Yeah.
And so he got 4 years at Harvard, excelled at Harvard. Then he did his PhD to show them like my Negro education was just as good. But if you want me to do your education, sure. And he excelled at it.
His mind is what's kind
He was brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Greg, same here about you, Greg Carr. Greg, you're an athlete.
I am.
Tell us about that.
Well, I would say I'm what they call a weekend warrior, Bernie. I'm a bowler. I have at least 200-300 games. I bowled in.
You did 200 or 300.
I've had two. I'm
Wow.
I'm trying to get about 98 more. If I could get 98 more, I could get in the Bowling Hall of Fame.
Okay.
So we're working on that. My team currently is in first place in my league right now, so I'm proud about that. I'm also an avid golfer. I love golf. Me and my buddy get and play golf, and then my brother and I we fish practically every weekend. So I'm an outdoorsman too.
Tell us about the football years, man.
Oh, the football years. Oh, see, I don't know if we got time for that, but I will tell you this, that probably my senior year we had an undefeated season that unfortunately came to an end in the first round of the playoffs. We lost to the eventual state champion, but the season I'm most proud of is my junior year when we started off 0-4.
With what school?
Brentwood High School.
Okay.
And so a bunch of us were juniors at this time, and we had winning seasons since our freshman and sophomore years. So we went to the captains. We said, we don't want to overstep our bounds, but we want to win.
Yeah.
And we know y'all want to go out with a win, too. They said, let's make a goal to win our last 5 games. They said, but we're 0-4. It doesn't matter. I said, if we can win these next 5 games, we can make a statement. And so we said, let's start off in practice. And so we would get hyped up in practice, and we came out, and even the coaches caught on. So they said, well, because first time they put me in as a starter, I replaced the punt returner in the first game. And I told the other guy back, he said, if I catch the ball, block for me. And I said, if I catch it, I said, I'm about to run it back for a touchdown. He went, yeah. I ran it back for 89 yards. First time I ever touched it.
That's beautiful.
And so they started to put me into the offense. So we've been practicing this kickoff reverse. And every time I had to, because I was a wide receiver, I had to learn how to get the ball like a running back. So I'm running during the game. We practice 1,000 times in practice. I'm looking for my buddy, and he is like 6 feet in front of me. And then he laterals the ball back to me. I said, what are you doing? And so we're going in slow motion. I'm like, I'm going to get tackled. So I started running as fast as I could. I said, I'm going to get tackled in the morning. I could hear the crowd screaming. So I'm running. I said, well, eventually they're going to tackle me. I said, I'll just keep resting. Why is the end zone getting closer and closer? And I said, I don't want to look back. So I ran across the end zone. Closest guy was 40 yards away.
I know it wasn't.
92-yard kickoff return. So
Congratulations,
yeah.
Greg, again.
Yeah. So you made me relive those glory days.
That's beautiful.
But I'm most proud of that because we did come back and we got a share of the conference championship, and we beat a team, Eureka, was no longer in our conference at that time. But and we beat them 7-6, and I scored a game-winning touchdown in that game.
Congratulations again.
Yeah, made me relive that glory days.
Greg Carr is my guest. You know, we're talking about not only his athleticism, but also his progress as a director and writer and actor. So we'll be back with Gregory Carr after this.
A lot of people are experiencing some difficult times walking through the journey of life, feeling that they're just totally overwhelmed. Maybe you're one of those individuals. I want to encourage you to get in God's Word, know that He loves you. He'll never forsake you. He's got a purpose for your life. If you haven't reached out and helped somebody lately, there's so many people that need help at this time. And those opportunities are available to you at New Life Evangelistic Center. We have search and rescue teams that are going out, finding people everywhere, and taking them to the direct help they need, helping them break the cycle of homelessness, going out to a wide variety of residential living programs we have. So many people hurting at this particular moment, and many that are in need. And you're going to feel good about helping somebody else that's in need. So if you want further information, call us at 314-421-3020. You can give online at nlecstl.org. You can volunteer, and most of all, you can really pray. We need prayer warriors at this time, facing some critical needs at this moment, and your prayers will definitely make a big difference for good. So please continue to keep us in your prayers here at the New Life Evangelistic Center.
Today's subject is Angela Davis, who was born in 1944 in Birmingham, Alabama. She's best known as a radical African-American educator and activist for civil rights and other social issues. As a graduate student at the University of California, San Diego in the late 1960s, she joined several groups, including the Black Panthers. Hired to teach at the University of California, Los Angeles, Angela Davis ran into trouble in the school's administration because of her association with communism. They fired her, but she fought them in court and got her job back. Outside of academia, Angela Davis becomes a strong supporter of three prison inmates in Soledad Prison. They were John Clisette, Frida Dungo, and George Jackson. They were accused of killing a prison guard. And during Jackson's trial in 1970, an escape attempt was made, and several people in the courtroom were killed. Angela Davis was brought up on several charges, including murder. After spending 18 months in jail, she was acquitted in 1972. Today, she's a professor of the University of California, Santa Cruz, and she teaches courses in history and consciousness after returning to the classroom. Angela Davis.
It takes many partners to operate New Life Evangelistic Center. We're a large ministry operating and serving so many people all throughout Missouri. And so we appreciate so much Bernie Hayes and his many years of dedicated service to people who are experiencing homelessness all throughout Missouri. But we need people like you to partner with Bernie Hayes and with New Life Evangelistic Center to make a real impact in the lives of people who are hurting now. In a very practical way, you are being the hands and feet of Christ in the streets of St. Louis and Springfield, Missouri, and beyond. So I want to thank everyone who is partnering with New Life Evangelistic Center. I want to challenge you to get involved today for the glory of God and the good of others in our community. Thank you so much. And God bless those who are making a big impact on the lives of hurting people.
Welcome back. My guest is Greg Carr. It's hard to describe who he is because he's so many different things, like I keep saying. Greg, you brought a bodyguard with you today. Who was that?
Oh, that's my brother Daryl. Yeah. I call him my road dog. That's
Your road dog.
We get on the road. We go on weekend adventures. We go fishing. We also big hunters too. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, our father and mother taught us that. Yeah.
Greg, when we left you, we were talking about your progress on the football field and in sports and athlete. But tell us how you got into directing and writing and acting.
Boy, I got into directing and writing protests. You know, as usual, that's my life's kind of been one big long protest. I was playing football at Tar Heel College. I transferred from William Jewell to Tar Heel College, so I had to sit out a year. And while I'm sitting out a year, I said, I want to do something else. I always want to try to do some acting. So I snuck into a callback, not the actual audition, but the callback. And then the director said, what are you doing there? I said, I'm here for the callback. He goes, were you here last night? I said, yeah, I don't remember you. I said, but I remember you. And somehow I got into the play. It was a play by the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov. It's called The Three Sisters. I played a Black Russian. And so I'm doing all these great things, and I finally get into this musical. I always wanted to do it because I'm a big musical theater guy. And I was in Guys and Dolls. And I just was having the time of my life. I was dancing, I was singing, wearing the 50s outfits. And then that later that fall, I got cast as a lead role in a musical called the 1940s Radio Hour. One of my classmates said, "Oh, Greg, I'm so glad to see you get cast in this role. It's a shame for what they did to you in Guys and Dolls." I said, "What did they do to me in Guys and Dolls?" He said, "Oh, you don't know?" I said, "No." So I don't want to. I said, "No, you got to tell me now." She said, "You know, you were supposed to be the lead, Sky Masterson, in Guys and Dolls." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, you were cast as the lead, but they needed a black female lead opposite you because we were in Northwest Missouri and they were kind of concerned about the racial optics." I said,
Okay.
"Really?" And so that kind of upset me. I said, "I thought the arts were a little bit more liberal and open-minded." So I said, "Okay, fine." And so I realized that I was running up against this quite often. Every time I would be up for a role, they would cast another white actor in that place. I said, "Why don't I do something? Why don't I write my own stuff? Why don't I direct my own stuff?" And so I wrote a play, and I wrote it for another one of my classmates, and he got kicked out for the end of the semester. And so they're still going to do the show. And I said, "We got to find somebody to play that role." And the director said, I got somebody to play that role. I said, "Who? Let me know." He said, "You." I said, "Oh, no. I wrote it for somebody else." And so I started rehearsing the show. Director Brendan, he just chops me up every night. "You're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong." And so we all go home at the end of the rehearsal, and the director says, "Greg, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Yeah." Kind of chopped me up. He goes, "But I want to talk to you from director to actor. I want to talk to you director to playwright." He goes, how am I directing the show?" So he switched hats. I said, "Oh," because he was white and he didn't know much about black culture. So I said, "Well, okay." And so we learned this kind of give and take.
Okay.
So when I was the actor, he was in charge. But after rehearsal, I was the playwright, and I was in charge. So we fostered this great. So that's why I learned how to be in my own pieces and direct my own pieces. So I've directed myself in shows before, which is really a Spike Lee kind of thing. You know, Spike Lee kind of mastered that, who I really admire a lot.
Now, how can we reach you, Greg? And tell us what your current position at Harris-Stowe State
I am
University.
assistant professor of theater. You can reach me at carg@hssu.edu, and my direct line is 314-340-3667.
Now, you and Ron Himes work together pretty soon.
I have. I have worked with Ron Himes since 2001.
Yeah.
I had not done a show with the Black Rep in 24 years, and then I did the show Hold On by Paul Webb, which was the original script for the movie Selma.
Wow.
And when Ron Himes called me, I was in Providence, Massachusetts at the time at a Tennessee Williams Theater Festival. And I'm thinking, so what's Ron calling me for? I said, I didn't know, I remember auditioning for a show. He goes, he asked me to come to a callback. I said, this feels like, deja vu all over again.
Yeah, all
he said, I
over
want you to come to callback. We're doing Hold On. I said, yeah. He goes, your son auditioned. I said, yeah, I'm really proud of him. He got his degree from...
Your son?
Yeah, my son. Yeah, Missouri Baptist, got a degree in theater. Really doing great.
Okay.
Your son will be here. He said, I want you to read too. I went, huh? He said, I want you to read for King and Ralph Abernathy. And he said, I'm really thinking about casting your son as John Lewis. So ended up casting me as Ralph Abernathy and him as John Lewis. And we have a scene in which we, the older members of the SCLC kind of meet with the younger members of SNCC. And I have some snide remarks to say to my son. So we almost go to blows on stage. So it's really fun. But that was one of my greatest acting moments, being on stage with my son.
That's beautiful.
I loved it.
Bob Dimler, our director and producer here, is asking if any of your current students are doing anything with the Black Rep.
None of my current students at the time, but we are working on some internships with them.
Okay.
We have taken them to see shows of the Black Rep, and we're working on that. The Black Rep used to be out of Harris-Stowe for a short time.
Oh, certainly. I remember.
They ran out for about 3 years. So we had a partnership. So we're still working on those things, but we definitely want some of our students to be in their internships programs and some of the eventual shows.
Well, what's next for you, Greg?
What's next for me? I had a chance to meet with my students this week. We've had this tradition since 2018. After we do a show, we do our cast party at the best steakhouse. So we go out to either dinner. This time we went out for lunch.
Okay.
But it was more like a working lunch. And I realized, so my students said, what do we do next, Professor? I said, okay, I tell you what. Let's think about what we're going to do in the fall. Let's think about what we're going to do next spring. So we're thinking about we're running some ideas for some possible musicals for next spring. We bounced around The Wiz. We'll see if we can get the rights to it because people would be very excited. I said, but maybe The Wiz might not happen in 26, maybe 27. I said, but what if we think about doing the musical Godspell? The musical gospel is a very, we did the gospel. That's the first show I did with the Black Rep.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. But you see very few versions that are black.
Yeah.
And so I'm really considering creating like a whole season called the Jubilee season, in which perhaps in the fall we do this adaptation I did of James Weldon Johnson's God's Trombones that will include music and dance, and then we maybe possibly do Godspell in the spring. So we do like a whole like spiritual season. So that's something that's kind of in the works. We're not sure yet, but we're going in that direction.
Greg, knowing you, who you are, as long as I've known you, I know that you're very conscious about being African American and doing things for your people. You made some changes at SIUE, didn't you?
I did. I enjoyed being there. I was only there for a short time. My good friend Lisa Colbert, who passed away in 2002, who was also a big Black Rep person.
Sure.
We would have this conversation. She would say, "Greg, I really want you to come down to SIUE and support me." And said, "You always talk about." I said, "I know, I'm going to come down there." And then we were doing Bubbling Brown Sugar that year.
Wow.
And we saw her that night on Saturday night, and we noticed she was kind of hoarse. And we said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I think I'm catching a cold." And we said, "Well, go home and take care of yourself." And then the next day, I was living in the city at the time. My next door neighbor said, "Greg, I know you heard about what Lisa." I said, "What do you mean about Lisa? I just saw her last night. She passed away last night." I was totally floored.
Wow.
And two of our students were in the show. Two who were actually doing amazing. Joe P.E. King, who was a playwright and actor doing great things, and Sophia Stevens, who was in The Lion King on Broadway. These were two of our students. And so I went to them after the show, because we didn't tell them before the show, because we wouldn't have had a show that day. And of course, they had a breakdown because that was their mentor. So I went to Joel. I said, "Joel, what can I do?" He goes, "Unless you got an MFA in theater, you can't do anything for me." I said, "Joel, I got an MFA in theater." He goes, "Don't play." I said, "I do." He said, "Could you take Lisa's place?" I said, I guess I could. So that's how I got to SIUE, and I had a chance to meet all these amazing people. And I directed a Black Theater workshop while I was down there and kind of established some things. And my good friend Kathy Bentley, who's also a very fine director and actor, assisted me. And then she ended up getting the position, because I went on to, of course, go to Harris-Stowe.
Yeah, sure.
So I feel like that's been my legacy. And they did one of my plays there called A Colored Funeral, which was very, very successful. Probably one of the most successful shows they did with the Black Theater Workshop. So and of course, my work at SIU, East St. Louis Charter School, goes without saying. I mean, some of my students still, in fact, one of my students is still so close to me, we go fishing from time to time.
That's great.
He calls me up, so I love that.
Greg Carr is my guest, and we'll be back. We're at the New Life Evangelistic Center, 2428 Wilson Road in Overland, Missouri. Reverend Larry Rice has been supporting those in need for more than 53 years here. And we're at 2428 Wilson Road, Overland, Missouri, 63114. Please come by and visit us. We'll be right back with Greg Carr after this.
Since 1972, New Life Evangelistic Center has been on the front lines, reaching out, helping the hurting, the homeless, the fatherless, the widowed throughout mid-America. Yes, although it's had its roots in St. Louis, it now has expanded throughout mid-America into India and Africa, Haiti, and other places around the world. Oh, what a history New Life Evangelistic Center has. And we have many of these history books available to you, and they're right there on Amazon. And if we can help you get one of those, you contact us at 314-421-3020. But in addition to all that, we want to share a lot of that history with you right here as we take a look at how the work began and how the Lord has taken us throughout the years and the miracles that we have seen, all because of caring people like you. You're part of the history of the New Life Evangelistic Center. And we're believing that 2025 is the year that the center is going to become alive and seeing the Lord do exceedingly beyond we can even ask or think. We're on the verge of miracles. Yes, New Life Evangelistic Center has a rich history, but there's much more yet to come. And that's why I'm inviting you to familiarize yourself with the history of the past and be a part of the miracles of the present. Yes, let the Lord God Almighty work in you and through you. Let Him do exceedingly beyond what you can ask or think. He's got a purpose for you. And we want you to be able to live out that purpose as you get directly involved in the history of New Life Evangelistic Center and what the Lord is doing now.
When times are tough, we need to turn to God and trust Him. Right now, across the country, many are experiencing economic hardship. Maybe for the first time, people are having to strain in their budgets with their finances. There are so many people who are experiencing homelessness, and that number is going to continue to rise. You are needed right now to partner alongside New Life Evangelistic Center. You can make real change in the lives of men and women who are experiencing homelessness. By offering gospel-like love in word and deed, you can help holistically support men and women who are suffering in so many different ways. We need you now. Please call our center at 314-421-3020, 314-421-3020, and get involved today. You are needed. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Welcome back. My guest is Greg Carr. And like I said, it's so hard to describe what he is because he's so many different things. But right now he's in charge of the casting and the acting and the communications at Harris-Stowe State University. Just finished a wonderful play recently. Greg, the Doge organization, I mean, what they call it, Doge, in charge of cutting government spending and so forth. Mm-hmm. How might that affect you or Harris-Stowe State University or your department?
It would impact us very harshly, Bernie, to be honest, because we depend on a lot of funding locally with Regional Arts Commission, Missouri Arts Commission, even the NEA, which is the National Endowment for the Arts.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
It sends a bad signal because the arts really open up the minds of our students, regardless of what stage in life they're in. That's why the arts are vital. One of the things that we've talked about, even with the STEM people, we say STEM is only good if you have the arts. So we often tell STEM programs to, instead of saying STEM, why don't you make STEAM? Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that even Einstein even talked about. I mean, the great Albert Einstein said you need the arts. He said, without creativity, you really don't have science. And because he was such a creative person. Yeah. So one of the things, and because I'm also I'm a budding writer. I'm working on some novels, some young adult novels. One of the things I'm working on is a piece called Metacognition. And in this futuristic world, the arts are outlawed. And so kids have to learn the arts almost like in secrecy, and the government's constantly looking at. So it's kind of like a Big Brother kind of situation. And even though the story is supposed to take place in 2054, it's really kind of right now. Mm-hmm. Because the arts are truth tellers. When we see a stage play or we see a piece of art or music, it's there to tell truth. It's there to include us. And I think we also talked about, even in Nazi Germany, one of the first things that they came for was the arts. They took all the visual art down. They jailed the artists because they didn't want the truth tellers, so they could create a whole different culture of their own and indoctrinate people to culture. The arts are things that keep the mind open.
And they burn the books.
Yeah, they burn the books.
Yeah, sure.
Which is kind of weird because they're banning and burning books right now, isn't it?
Precisely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like what you're saying, the play you're talking about sounds like the 50s, 1984.
Exactly.
Yeah.
George Orwell.
Yeah, sure. Well, Greg, you do so many things again, and how can we reach you and get more information from you?
You can reach me at carg@hssu.edu, and my number is 314-340-3667.
Greg, what's in the future for Greg Carr?
Well, coming soon, my play, Johnny Taylor is Gone, written by me and produced by Aquarian Rising Productions, which I'm a part of, a new upcoming Black theater, is going to be produced here in St. Louis very shortly, and we're excited. We have a great cast. It's a comedy set in North St. Louis, in a bar in North St. Louis called the Golden Zodiac Lounge.
Wow.
I'm sure everybody's going to know which lounge we're talking about.
Certainly.
But it pays homage to all the great black bars around. And when I had it produced in Cleveland back in 2005, the reviewers loved it, and they described it as when Cheers meets Barbershop. That's what you get with Johnny Taylor is Gone. So I really want people to come out and see the show. And it's set in St. Louis, too.
Wow. Johnny Taylor was a good friend of mine. We were very, very close.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, because you in radio,
Appreciate you so much, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
And thanks each and every one of you for supporting the New Life Evangelistic Center. I'm Bernie Hayes. Please have a great day.